Hi dudes, everybody asks me where are all the Siege YouTubers? They can't upload videos because of Joe Biden. They're unemployed. Trans women can't even get a coffee job because of woke. It's unbelievable.
During the summer of 2024, what was by all accounts the worst season of Rainbow Six Siege dropped, putting me and many Siege content creators in a similar frustrating position. We weren't particularly sure what to do. I, like many people, when their business isn't going well, decided to pivot, but I didn't really get to pivot in the way that I wanted. I had a great stopgap during this hiatus in the form of a how to play every character guide for the Valve MOBA shooter Deadlock, and my operator how-to on Scopos proved the success of my operator how-to formula 10 years running. I could boil down this video to its bare bones and say that Siege YouTube has certain expectations due to its niche as a genre, and how niches tend to have limited algorithmic maneuverability, and that's why everybody and your dog makes an operator tier list every season. But as is the case with online media just about everywhere, everybody seems to be having a problem with formulaic content. And everybody has an open problem with it. They express that they don't like it, but it's the content that seems to work.
Because the thing is, people are starving for this. They're starving for depth on the internet. They think it's just filled with toxicity and memes and all of these things that don't matter, but they can't pull themselves away from it. We don't need more Lunchleys or Mr. Beast bars that are just contributing to making the population obese and sick. The defining characteristic of an influencer, from what I've observed, is that they don't sell a product of inherent value.
Now it's not uncommon to see grown-ass adults glued to their phones while they're driving down the highway. If you're online 6 hours a day, and you're on pace to spend decades of your existence looking at flashing pixels, wasting your life, why wouldn't you take this more seriously?
So if nobody likes it, why is it working? Nobody likes skill-based matchmaking, except when its lack thereof doesn't provide the dopamine loop necessary to sustain a live service game. Nobody likes Marvel movies, except when Deadpool and Wolverine gross over $1.33 billion. Nobody likes big, boring, oversized SUVs and trucks, except the millions of Americans who love them so much, their presence in the market has made the humble four-door sedan an endangered species.
And I think that's what really makes me mad about that car dealership that said, oh, that's our cash price. Because they know 99% of the general public is walking in there to finance that truck. Nobody's paying cash except for 1% of the population. It's a fake number. Like, I consider us to be doing fairly okay in life, and I can't go in and drop $70,000 on a truck.
Rainbow Six Siege is dead, and any sensible content creator needs to pack their bags and move on to greener pastures, unless you're Jinxie. Then the game's perfectly fine, and it's never been better. The more time I spend online, the more I seem to encounter contradictions like this. That's probably why it feels nice to get away from the internet. When I'm on the internet, I almost feel a certain kind of emotional pressure to understand why this massive blob of popular opinion exists over here, and why this massive blob of popular opinion exists over there. Suffice to say that being away from the Rainbow Six Siege community, or at least not involving myself in it as much as I used to, has given me great pause, and perhaps a bit of needed perspective. I already mentioned that I did a Deadlock video. I absolutely adore Deadlock. I played a little bit of League of Legends in high school, and I wasn't very good at it, but it was a good way to socialize, because that's what all my friends were playing. Deadlock scratched my itch for that strategy component you get in a MOBA with the mechanical fun of a shooter game. But when I came back to start playing the game again after taking a month off, I noticed something. I sucked. Now, there are worse things in life than sucking at a video game, but it sure felt like a kick in the teeth after I had played the game competently for a decent amount of time, and it squeezed in a couple of 50k damage games by now. I felt like I had a natural grasp on things, even if my specifics could be improved upon. To my shock, I discovered that Valve had merged the casual and ranked MMR systems to improve queue times and stress test the skill-based matchmaking component they were working on before the game's big release, whenever the hell that is. Fair enough. But the game had been out for a few months, okay, maybe not out, but like kind of out, and some characters still seemed kind of broken, so I felt like there was a little bit of gamer psychology here that was left unchecked. If every game was ranked, quote-unquote, and there was no demarcation between it's okay if you suck and it's not okay if you suck matchmaking, then what was Valve's answer for the player enjoyment factor if you sucked? After all, the existence of a skill-based component meant that players were going to spam Bebop and Haze pretty much every single match, to the point where Haze was never absent from a single game of Deadlock I played at this time. Haze was infamous about a month or so ago because she was, well, she still is, kind of a Call of Duty character. Her 1v1 potential in gunfights is very strong when built right, and played to her highest potential, she can really clean up. She has an ultimate that consists of a no-aim killing move that can practically one-shot anybody who doesn't have the proper counterplay for it. It was getting to a point where Haze could farm with this ult and basically become unkillable. Now, I'll complain when I game, but I usually reserve forum posts or dedicated discussions to things like this, until I really find an issue from a standpoint of logic, and I felt Haze passed the eye test at least enough to warrant a discussion. Long story short, my conversations about her were quickly shut down by a simple get good. A day after I remarked on how badly Haze seemed to be failing the eye test, she got a nerf. So it seemed like I got what I wanted. Except for, well, acknowledgement that I was making a good point, but that's between me and my therapist, I guess. Why is balanced discussion for a game an open, invite-only kind of alpha, I guess maybe it's a beta early Valve access, such a contentious point? It'd be one thing if the game had been out for a while. I'm more than happy to embrace the suck and learn to love the process of improvement. What confused me was how disorienting it was to see this mindset be the prevailing cool, quote-unquote, opinion after playing Rainbow Six Siege for over 9 years. Where, if you tell somebody to get good in that community, this is a difference of audience capture. Deadlock, being a MOBA, has a more hardcore audience that is okay talking about balancing and the like. The Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six brand was a dad shooter for semi-hardcore gamers. So, the reactions ended up being different when Siege turned out to be a Counter-Strike echo. I can remember 5 years ago when I think I saw early warning signs of Siege going through some rough patches, and I tried to do Valorant content to offset that. That was a huge mistake. People tried to explain it away in a number of different ways. They said, oh, you'll be fine, you just gotta keep uploading through it, don't worry about it. Some people said, well, you gotta suck it up and play the algorithm, welcome to the grind, and then other people said, well, you should just upload what you like to upload. The reality was always somewhere in the middle. Yeah, you gotta do your job, but also that doesn't mean that you can't find ways to have fun with it, even if you're in a somewhat compromising position. One of the things you have to really understand on YouTube to do well is the reality of audience capture. And it's just basic business, right? If you're selling power tools for 5 years, and you say, actually, we're a pizza restaurant now, you're not going to really make any business. That's starting over. That's starting from scratch, and you can't label it as anything other than that. That doesn't mean that starting over is just an automatic fail. You can rip and twist a good idea and then repurpose it into a context that's appropriate for a different audience entirely. Another interesting example of how audience capture dynamics seem to be changing in the gaming space is Marvel Rivals. Capital G gamers may have had a blind spot for this one, myself included. Now, it is an Overwatch clone and people are gonna fault it for that, but for people who are into this kind of game, Marvel Rivals is doing tremendously well, and it kind of broke the notion that nobody wanted to play a game like Overwatch at all. So what's the development story behind this game? Well, it's developed by a Chinese mobile game developer. And it's, like, good. A shrimp did indeed fry this rice. This game may have undone 5 years of damage to the Marvel brand done by Disney for me personally. I've seriously considered trying to find some issues of the better comics, or at least the recommended ones, on eBay.
If your hand is cut off, a bionic arm can help you regain.
Edits like this never showed up on my feed for Secret Invasion, is all I'm saying. But my point kind of relates to what that guy was saying earlier at the beginning of this video.
People are starving for this. They're starving for depth.
People are tired of consuming content. They want to play games, watch movies, or listen to music that was created by somebody who gave a crap about what they were working on. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It doesn't have to be life-changing. It just needs to feel inspired. It needs to feel like a human made it. The bad reputation of League of Legends precedes it, but that doesn't matter, right? People think Jinx and Echo are cool character designs, so the new fighting game is probably gonna do okay, and obviously Arcane was a huge hit. Coming out of the pandemic, I really was convinced, or Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. Maybe I am just a huge idiot. I really thought for the longest time that you had to follow a cookie cutter formula to make it on YouTube. And in these 4 months, I've learned that two things can be right at the same time. Yes, the algorithm can be limiting and you have to do what you gotta do, but also there is a demand for cool stuff out there. I'm not trying to paint a demographic brush on people. I understand that there are plenty of dad shooter guys that saw Siege was Siege and said, okay, it's not for me, without necessarily prescribing moral blame to Ubisoft. But I don't really want to get into that. This video isn't about the culture war. While the reaction from the dad shooter guys was understandable, I'd say, 8 years ago, in terms of whether or not Rainbow Six Siege was supposed to be an esports title, that's why I kind of stopped giving the argument credit 8 years later, because it's been 8 years, and the audience wanted Siege to be this way. Otherwise, the game would be dead by now, and it's not. And Ubisoft is constantly accused of balancing the game for the competitive top 1% of skill bracket over the silver proletariat. This tendency to get mad at any small group of people in relation to the development, maintenance, or corporate oversight of a game is what I've jokingly referred to in previous videos as gamer populism. An often understandable, but I also often find, misplaced sentiment that paints a broad brush over the conversation of growing consumer resentment in the gaming space. I can't think of a better game that represents the apex of this argument than Rainbow Six Siege. It's widely accepted that the game's biggest problem around the summer of 2024, the time I stopped uploading Siege content regularly, was the cheating.
This is a public service announcement to Ubisoft, whatever you want to call it. But the cheating situation is getting completely out of hand. It's becoming ridiculous to a certain extent.
Why is cheating bad? Well, if the prestige of the game's competitive component, in this case ranked, is seen as tainted or untrue because of cheaters, or lack of trust in the shiny badge colors, nobody's gonna play ranked. And if nobody wants to play ranked, nobody has an incentive to learn the game. No incentive to learn the game means no demand for content, and that puts people like me in an understandably frustrating position. But how could the silver proletariat be correct in their assumption that the game is dying because of balancing for competitive play if the game does fine when the cheating thing is relatively handled? Well, they're half correct. Yeah, if the game was balanced like a wacky casual Modern Warfare 2 2008 Xbox 360 lobby, sure, the competitive matchmaking would be irrelevant. There'd be no incentive for cheaters or cheat makers because the audience would not care. But people do care. The audience for Siege does care. In fact, as far as I can tell, more people care about the shiny rank now than they used to when I was a kid. If you were really good at a video game when I was 13, you were kind of a weird nerd. Now gaming has become such a ubiquitous hobby that we've spawned a new category of skinny e-boys that have turned Valorant into their own personal equivalent of basketball with their friends after school. But what happens when those kids grow up and need a job? It's the economy, stupid. Now that does actually lead somewhere because as far as I can tell, the amount of time people spend playing video games has risen. But the amount of casual gamers that I know, that is, guys who will reliably log in an hour or two here and there, has seemed to diminish greatly. Gaming is a ubiquitous hardcore hobby, but if you are a gamer, you're probably going to make it a habitual thing, something that you do every day over the course of a long period of time. Gone are the days of casually keeping up with the occasional Battlefield or Gears of War that may get about 200 hours of mileage in the old Xbox 360. The semi-hardcore gamer that I knew of growing up isn't really a thing anymore. Hardcore gaming is a more popular hobby, and guess who hardcore gaming is really popular with? Unemployed people. No, I'm not trying to be funny or facetious. Young men without college degrees have replaced up to 75% of the time they previously spent working with gaming and other computer activities. Between 2004 and 2015, unemployed young men increased their gaming time by an average of 99 hours per year. On average, unemployed young men spend about 2 hours per day gaming, with some playing up to 6 hours daily. So the joke about unemployment lobbies when you get to a certain threshold of matchmaking in Call of Duty isn't really a joke. In fact, former presidential candidate Andrew Yang dedicated a decent chunk of time to his "Hey, I'm running for president and here are my policies" book, The War on Normal People. Now, I know that some people are rolling their eyes at me bringing up a political campaign book, but one of the things I liked about Yang at the time was that he wasn't afraid to talk statistics. It was that lack of fear that ironically probably kept him from getting too far at all. He should have been scared of talking statistics. What I'm getting at is gaming as a consumption habit has always been around, but the addition of a competitive ladder system to any of these multiplayer games certainly seems to be a relevant aspect to the enjoyment loop, and more relevant than it was years ago. Many young unemployed gamer bros report higher levels of happiness compared to similar demographics decades ago, until they get to their 30s and 40s. And this makes sense because video games provide a sense of achievement, autonomy, and escapism that may be lacking in their real-world circumstances, until it becomes evident that, well, you're not really getting where you want to be. What if you are working? What if you're busting your ass 40 plus hours a week for 40 grand a year? Or let's say 30 grand, hell, try 26 grand. Factory workers, line cooks, security guards, farmhands, and yes, baristas are all the kinds of jobs that I would absolutely muck up on the first day if I didn't have any training. I can confidently say I'm at a point of expertise and knowledge about the content creation scene that me uploading a Yap session every single day, which I did throughout the month of August, was not as demanding or involved as working for 8 hours on my feet in a busy kitchen. Across the span of content that I uploaded, the average amount of work put into the videos was about 2 to 3 hours of video. Is it any wonder nobody wants to hear content creators complain about their declining situation if a game is falling off due to circumstances out of their control? I don't envy Destiny YouTubers right now. Who wants to grind Valorant after performing a high-intensity, high-pressure job with low tolerance for mistakes and little money to show for it at the end of the week? I'm not in a hurry to get flamed by a 16-year-old for making one mistake in a virtual anime shooter game. Let's throw in other compounding factors, the necessity of roommates to keep expenses low, and maybe the omission of a car payment. Don't forget out-of-pocket health insurance that doesn't cover much to begin with. I'm not the only person with a college degree that's had to bite the bullet and look around for the quote-unquote bullshit jobs that we were told would be our sad, lonely, miserable fates if we didn't go to college. In the last 4 months, while I scoured through the job market looking for just about anything I could do to get back on my feet after leaving Texas, I realized a lot of white-collar positions were further out of my reach than I'd ever imagined. Nobody at the time really seemed to care about my degree or the numbers I got on YouTube across 2 different channels. I needed to know the specific procedures and operational capacities that a company needed in-house. It's a problem that I neglected completely while I had my nose on the YouTube grindstone. I wasn't working on my certs or anything like that. Over 50% of college graduates work in jobs that do not require a bachelor's degree, with 75% of these individuals remaining underemployed for up to a decade after graduation. So that means that the intended goal of not getting the retail job at the grocery store through the process of getting a degree has, failed. Not to mention, in many instances, the presence of having a college degree at a basic entry-level job like Starbucks can be enough for people to say no because whoever is hiring you is scared you're just going to run off when you get a better opportunity. And entry-level jobs are not entry-level anymore, with companies often requiring 3 to 5 years of experience for said entry-level jobs. Now, in my personal opinion, it should be illegal to say something is an entry-level job when it's not, but that's neither here nor there. The average American salary is $68,000. That number is obviously weighted by rich guys. At the end of the day, 84% of Americans earn under $100,000 a year. More than half of Americans right now are not earning the average American salary. So yeah, no shit, nobody wanted to hear it when I lamented the potential need to do another job besides YouTube. However understandable my complaints were, a lot of people right now are going through it. And a lot of people simply don't have the time or the patience to learn a complicated video game that has the same amount of mental intensity and focus as the job they are working that's already trying the limits of their patience. It makes sense then that the vast majority of gaming as we know it seems less and less for adults these days and tailored to the demographic that is most likely to spend an unlimited amount of time playing them. Teenagers and college-aged guys taking out student loans to pay for their living expenses. The last 4 months have put me in a confusing spin. Sometimes I think I have a good grasp on where gamers are one minute, then I lose sight of where I am the next. One gaming community is content with being for casuals, and the other one wants to be more hardcore. One game was ruined by the developers and not the publishers. The other one is the other way around. Complaints abound throughout every game you play, and the way to appear cool and hip is to join in on the complaining and to complain about the right things. But ultimately, I think the general malaise my generation of late 20-somethings has for live service gaming comes down to this. I think people would be a lot more enthusiastic to take up a competitive game as a hobby if the rest of the time they spent was in something that didn't mentally or emotionally exhaust them. And if you're unemployed, what else is there to do but game, I wonder? Or watch football? I've always had the option to come back to YouTube if the job hunt didn't work out the way I wanted. Now more than ever, I realize that a lot of people are in the frustrating and crushing position of not having a YouTube channel to make money off of when times are tough.